up, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the Auto Detailing Podcast. I'm Jimbo, your host, and today is super special. I'm super excited. I actually was able to do a podcast with Justin Labato, the reflection artist. And for a long time, him and I have met up at SEMA and actually recorded a podcast for this podcast, Auto Detailing Podcast, in the Buff and Shine booth. And since obviously everything going on, we weren't able to do that this year because SEMA didn't happen. And Justin is also in Florida and I'm in California. So a bit of a geographical limitations as well, I guess you could say. Anyway, we hopped on for almost an hour. I think it hit over an hour where the tables were kind of turned and he was interviewing me for their podcast, which is the Reflection Artist Podcast put on by Buff and Shine. You can find it wherever podcasts are available. I would encourage you to check it out. I was lucky enough to be episode number 6, which is awesome. I feel super honored to be part of that first initial group. And it was a great podcast and a great show. A lot of insight into kind of my beginnings and stuff like that. And Justin picked up on some really key themes that kind of go along in at least my journey, and I think a lot of other people's journey as well. So I would encourage you rather to check out their podcast, and I hope you enjoy this podcast with me as the guest and Justin Labato as the host. Thanks for listening.
All right, let me make sure I have us up and running here for Zoom. And I think we are. So we are officially live on Facebook. It is Wednesday, December 2nd. We're already in December. You believe that? It's
Isn't
the end
that
of the year. It's
crazy?
finalizing 21. I have special guest Jimbo Balaam, and a lot of you may know, and a lot of you may not know. So we're here to kind of go into Jimbo's background and who he is and what he's done in the industry. And Jimbo's been in the industry and a operating detailer for 12 years since 2008. And literally, we were just talking about it in May of 2008. He got started, and I got started in June. So we're a month off in regards to getting into the industry and having the track record that's brought us here today, of course. But he's also somebody who is a product consultant. And, he dived into his own podcast in the 2014 timeframe, and he has his own auto detailing podcast. And you can look that up. And of course, he'll give you the links and platforms once we finish up this podcast. And then, YouTube, he's been involved with that and doing product reviews and product testing. And so he's got his hands in a lot of different things, which is one of the topics we'll cover in regards to different streams of revenue to say. And this is a perfect example of that with Jimbo. So Jimbo, thank you and welcome. And why don't you go ahead and give us a little background on how you got started and why you got started in this wonderful world of detailing.
Yeah, man, it's so nice to be on this side of the microphone. What has it been 4 or 5 years in a row that we met up at SEMA and I interviewed you. And now when Julio reached out and is like, hey, can Justin interview you? I'm like, dude, for sure. We got great chemistry. I always have a great time. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to interview just another detailer like me. I appreciate it. So I wish we could be doing it in person, but whatever. This will have to do, I guess.
This will have to do. We are above and beyond social distancing at this point.
Yes. At least we don't have our mask on. Anyway, I won't go there. So where did it all begin? Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to own my own business. I just didn't know what that business would be. In fact, I always knew that I wanted to own multiple businesses. But that was the extent of the thought. Like, yeah, one day I'm going to own multiple businesses. It was like, well, what industry, doing what? I had no idea. So when I was 18 years old was when I first got like my first nicer to me car. And I had a payment on that car, and for whatever reason,
5 years ago, right?
Yeah. A couple years ago. Yeah, you can't see my gray hair on this mic. I must have a good filter on. So when I got that car, it had a payment, and for whatever reason, I just automatically thought like, okay, if I'm gonna have a payment on this car's never gonna be dirty. I don't know why I thought that, where that even came from or whatever. So that was kind of my first like dive into keeping my car clean. And it was just with store-bought products. But I constantly had this thought in the back of my head of, I'm going to own my own business one day. And I was doing the whole school route, going to community college, hated it. But that, back in 2007, 2008, I graduated high school 2006. So I guess that would be 2006. I kind of started messing around with cleaning my own car, and kind of diving into that. And back then the route was you went to college after high school because you needed to get a good job and a real job.
Yeah,
And so
standard
that was the
American way, right?
standard American way. That was what my older sister did. That was the plan for me. And I hated school. It was horrible. And at night, I was working at a restaurant as like a busboy food runner. And as I got more and more into kind of cleaning my own car, and that was the early days of YouTube as well. I think I joined YouTube in October 2006. Uh, Obviously didn't get deep into actually producing content for YouTube until 12 years later. Unfortunately, it's one of my mistakes that I made. But so I started really diving into videos on cleaning your car and detailing on YouTube around that time. And then I had the epiphany one day of like, I wonder if this could be a business. I'm like, I hate going to school. I love cleaning cars. The job I have is great, but it's all nights and weekends. And so that kind of sucks because I'm tired of working Thursday through Sunday night, and then going to school Monday through Thursday. I was getting kind of tired of it and didn't really like it anyway. And so I thought, you know what, maybe this is a business, like this whole cleaning a car thing. Let me see if I can, get some business going. And so I thought, well, who do I know that has money? And so I started with, friends and family, predominantly family. And then the managers at my restaurant, I just assumed they had money because they were managers, right?
Yeah.
And so actually my very first paying customer was a manager at the restaurant that I worked at. And so from there, from literally the thought of like, I wonder if this is a business, to researching on Craigslist and buying my first mobile trailer in May of 2008 is when I officially bought that. And literally I bought it on a Wednesday. On that Thursday, I was doing my girlfriend's parents' cars at the time. And I had drafted up like this little, printed Word doc of like a couple different packages and printed out like 25 of them. And as I was doing my girlfriend's parents' cars, literally the day after I purchased the trailer, they happened to live on like a corner lot house and a track. And I got a neighbor stopped and said, "Hey, do you do detailing?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I do," and literally scheduled her for the following day. And then it was just kind of off to the races. I was like, okay, I guess I guess this is a business now. And so made a ton of mistakes. Did a bunch of things wrong, learned how to clay bar on YouTube, which is interesting if you think about it then. But again, I had that mentality of no barriers.
Yeah, but
I'm going to do this.
YouTube then was a little bit more of rich and genuine information compared
Yes.
to now where it's become a lot more watered down. And that's
Right.
putting it in a respectful way.
Right. Yep. So yeah, it was much, much different then. You could actually get factual information, right? Versus, and I wish I could find that video that I watched. Who knows who it was by or what it was, but it gave me the general idea of what a clay bar would do. And so from there, I just tried to leverage, family and friends. And my mom had a friend that worked at a corporate office building that was close by, that they used to have a car washer come by, and he stopped coming for whatever reason. And so that was one of my first regular accounts, I guess, a fleet account. And then, just kind of snowballed from there, joined a networking group that helped a lot. And just,
you just kept plugging away and trying to find every outlet where somebody would be willing to let you work, and detail their vehicle.
100%.
Now, once you reached that friends and family bubble and you've got most of those already under your wing, at that point, I know that you said you had mentioned with an account that you grabbed, did you start to see a little bit of a transition or gray area to where once friends and family were out of the way, now it's on to the real world money? And did you see a little bit of a dipping point and have to grow from there, and it had its own obstacles?
So yes, that happened a few times. So after I got out of the initial like friends and family, I was doing a lot of corporate office buildings. So, only mobile detailing, and really, showing up to an office building that I could do 5 or 6, 7 cars was kind of my sweet spot in the beginning. And I had one of those every day, sometimes twice a day. I would go to, and I called those like fleet accounts. They weren't dealerships or anything like that. They were personal people's cars while they were working. And so that was cool for a long time. And then the problem became, so that was like my first transition out of like friends and family. And I picked up a lot of those from the networking group that I was in. So a lot of these people were insurance agents or tax people or CPAs or their friends were, like I had one guy, his friend was the like head of procurement at the Carl's Jr. Corporation or Hardee's for people, and they their corporate offices were right by me. And so I was referred to that, head of procurement at Carl's Jr. to do their employees' cars as an employee benefits program at the Carl's Jr. corporate offices, which
nice.
Which sounds awesome. It's actually horrible. and that's what I came to find out about these fleet accounts is horrible, is that there's no differentiator between you and the last guy who was there every Thursday.
Other than the money,
right?
Yeah.
And so it's a total price war to the bottom. And it's cool because it's reoccurring work, but it's real crappy work. It's basically just car washes. They want it done for as cheap as possible. And most people can't tell the difference between you and the guy that used to be there and the guy that's going to be there after you. And so that was kind of the second evolution of like, how do I get out of this? Like, how do I say no to this consistent work that is low paying? And then how do I jump into the, I guess you could call it like the retail market of higher paying, higher quality customers, but maybe not as frequently as every week or every 2 weeks, or maybe not as, the kind of how I looked at it at the time was, okay, if I get a regular retail customer, I may only see them every 3 to 4 months versus every week or two, like I'm currently seeing people. Though they'll spend more as the retail client, I probably need more of them initially to fill my schedule. And then once I have enough of those retail customers, I'll have them on rotation every 3 or 4 months, and I'll eventually get to a nice cycle. But it's going to take me, to use your term, like that gray area. I'm going to have a time in between there where it feels like a little bit of a desert while I get people up and going. So yeah,
and I feel most people in that situation would probably get discouraged as to where, some discouragement leaves the motivation. And in your case,
right.
It did, in regards to, the mindset, the evolution of mindset and being more calculated and basically being from discouraged to proactive.
Right.
And figuring out, okay, how do I make this puzzle of business work and work for me and what I want it to do, versus just coming in every day for the same accounts day in and day out, and overwork in an underpaid scenario.
Totally.
I like it. I dig
it. Yeah. And you lose those accounts too. And that happened to me a couple times. One time in particular, I did have a used car dealership that specialized in Porsches. And that account I serviced every week. I believe it was pretty much just washes, but it accounted for $1,500 a month. Right. And to me, that was a lot of money. Yeah. And I remember when I lost that account, and I was like, crap, how am I going to make up this $1,500 a month? I'm going to have how many customers to make up this $1,500? And you got to remember, this is pre-ceramic coating world.
Yeah. Things were much different then. Your hustle was much stronger back then.
Much different. I remember I did a podcast one time, this is a little tangent, with Jason Rose, and he was talking about his first $1,000 detail. And I remember listening to that and be like, man, how do you rack up $1,000 for a detail in a pre-coding world, in this current climate that we're in with coatings or even PPF, like you are, like a $1,500 detail is, you can get there quick, but when you're talking about just shampooing, clay barring, and machine polishing, it takes a lot to get there.
It does.
So, yeah.
So after the situation of, kind of, not necessarily losing the fleet, I feel like you just more or less graduated, because like you said, there's many people that would have came in and taken that spot, and most of them probably wouldn't have noticed the difference. So it was more of a personal, probably attachment, because you had that account and you look forward to that money, versus it actually being the best business move you could have made.
100%. It wasn't, it came down to running a business like that in that market is not sustainable because there's nothing that differentiates you.
No.
And that's the hardest part is like, well, can you do it for 20 because the last guy did? And it's like, or the car wash down the street has the unlimited monthly for $30 and you want to charge me $30 per time? Like, why would I do that? And so there's no differentiator and it's grueling work. I mean, it's when you have to think about it. If you're charging $25 a car, you do 10 cars, you only made $250. Like, not to sound like a pompous ass, but that may be really good money for a lot of people, but it's not sustainable to do that. Right.
No.
And you really can't grow a business, pay proper taxes, go to places like SEMA, have nice shirts and hats and branded material and the latest tools. It's extremely difficult to do that on something like $200 a day.
Yeah.
You know,
and presentation is everything.
Presentation
your
is
personal,
everything.
your business, everything that the aura of who you are and what you represent as your brand has to be T-top. I mean, everything has to be
100%.
Yeah.
100%, especially in this, and even down to your website and your Yelp profile and your socials. It's like, that's what people are looking at, you know, that's what people are seeing. So that's, I just started to realize like, you know what, not only that was part of it, but also like, man, if I'm not out doing a car, I'm not making any money. Like that's a problem. I get sick and I'm out for 3 days. Like, I'm at zero revenue for those 3 days, you know, and that's fine when you're living at home with your mom and dad. But when, as you know, when you bring a kid into the world and you got a wife and, you know, you want to buy a house, you want to expand, you want to do all this.
Financial responsibilities.
Got all these financial responsibilities that come in and it's like, man, all right, I got to figure something out, you know, and that's what started to happen of like, I literally can't go do a fleet account because it's not enough money.
No. Not at all.
know?
And then when you have that 3 days out, you can't call the bill collector and be like, hey, I was sick for 3 days, bro.
Yes.
Can you guys just give me some leeway or defer a payment? They're going to be like,
Or what if you want to go on vacation? You know, it's like, I want to take a week off and it's like, I can't, you know, that sucks. And then you can't work on your business because you're too busy working in your business. And so it became this like really horrible cycle to try to break out of like, I got to go to work to make money. Cause if I don't make money, I can't feed the family, but really I need to work in my business or I need to work on my business so I could grow my business, but I can't cause I got to go do that. And it just became this like really bad cycle. I will say though, the good thing is that I had a ton of time to listen to audiobooks and podcasts and really learn, you know, really take that, what do they call it? Like the automobile university, you know, I really took that to the next level because I could fit in literally 8 hours of either podcast or audiobooks a day, you know, and most audiobooks are 6 to 8 hours. So I'm like, shoot, I was burning through books, burning through podcasts. And so that kind of fed all these ideas, and led into in 2014 me starting my own podcast because I'm like, that was just a total go at, okay, I want to give back to the community for all this information that I have, but also I need an additional revenue stream, man. I'm literally drowning out here. Like this isn't sustainable. I got to figure something else out. I got to become relevant on the internet, you know? And so that's really what spurred that, you know, and that was a nights and weekends hustle. You know,
and even with that, I mean, like you said, you know, taking the downtime and being proactive and basically education and knowledge is power. 100%. And that's where a lot of people, they hit a wall because they don't feel that they need it or they don't have time for it. And listen, there's always time. It's the time management that you exercise that makes a difference. And 100%. If you're not exercising that, then no, you're not going to have time and you're going to make excuses. But when the bills come, there's no excuses. And that's the thing that makes the difference between somebody who's a hustler or entrepreneur versus, you know, the guy that just goes in, clocks out, and that's it. The mediocre lifestyle.
I think so. That was always something for me. Like if I was just I could never be an employee because I'd be the world's worst employee. And I've tried it too. During tough times, I've gone back to try to get a job somewhere else. And one time I even landed a job and did that on the side too. And I was like the world's worst employee because I just saw all the efficiencies in the business and, had that thought of like, it'd be much better if I was just running this place,
And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's the mindset though. A lot of people don't get to transition or evolve into that mindset.
Right.
In their whole life, they may go that way, but unfortunately, it's perspective, one, and two, good mentorship. And then three, education,
Right.
education, which should be probably at the top of the list, but yeah. And taking the time to educate yourself with the proper, the books, all the stuff that actually means something, that has value to it, because you could feed your body crap too, but if you feed your body the good stuff, then you're solid, or your brain, I should say.
Totally. And I made, I could have made, looking back now and knowing what I know now to then, I could have been a better business owner and probably been more profitable with those fleet accounts and really utilized it to my advantage, and just didn't, at the time, I didn't have the tools or the resource or the knowledge to do that. Something as simple as just having a good CRM, and keeping track of my customers and maybe running specials or trying to upsell, or, that, looking back on it, there was definitely things that I failed big time at that I could have done better that would have probably made my business better. But again, in the moment, you're kind of stuck in that cycle.
That's okay, because that's the common stories to success. You got to scrape your knees often and fail in order to and learn how to be more successful.
Yep.
The next step you make. Yeah.
Yep.
100%.
Yep. So it's been a journey.
Yeah. So with the podcast now, that is full blown. I mean, what led you into, furthermore with, getting into the YouTube, and what led you into doing product reviews, and what was that
Yep.
interested you to go that route?
So with the podcast was really about starting to establish kind of myself on this thing called the internet, and it's funny because in 2014, I felt like so late to the party with the podcast that I was like, there's no way. And actually my first thought was like, I would start some sort of, it's almost embarrassing to admit it now, but like I would start some sort of business podcast. Right. And I was talking to a guy one day, actually a partner I still have, Pete. And I was like, man, I really want to start a podcast. These guys are killing it with business podcasts monetarily. And I really want to start a podcast. I just have no idea what I would talk about, And he looked at me like puzzled, like, you idiot. And that's what he actually said. He's like, you're an idiot. I'm like, why? He's like, haven't you been detailing for like 6 years? I'm like, yeah, but at the time I was kind of like, I want to get out of it. I'm kind of burnt out on it. I mean, literally have done thousands upon thousands of cars by that point, because it was an average day. I would do 10 cars. That was really an average day for me, 5-6 days a week. I was just touching an insane amount of cars. And so and because of that, I had to learn tips and tricks and hacks to get around things to become more efficient and more profitable. And so he was like, dude, you have all this information about car detailing. Why don't you just talk about what you already know? Why don't you just talk about the issues that you come across day to day? And I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, I'm still in it, so it's easy to talk about. I can talk about whatever just happened that day. And so that's where it all started, was I literally just recorded like, I remember one of my earliest podcasts were like, hey, I broke an air vent, or a customer accused me of breaking his air vent in his car. Here's how I handled it. That's it. Like, here's how I clean a rim. That's it. Like basic stuff. And so I went to go start researching before I started recording stuff. And then I went to go research like, okay, what do I want to call this thing? And I'm not very creative when it comes to names. My detailing business is Jimbo's Auto Detailing. It's not like I'm not creative when it comes to naming things. Right. So the only thing I could think of is like Auto Detailing Podcast. And I'm like, that's so basic, that has to be taken. And it wasn't. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my moment. Like, how does no one have Auto Detailing Podcast? So I just started the Auto Detailing Podcast. Like, that was it, and I started literally recording on my phone and learned about Libsyn and podcast hosting and at the same time, like website building and, the difference between my knowledge with the internet was so limited. I didn't know that you had to have a hosting service that was separate from your URL. Like to me, I was like, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And then how do I get these recordings off my phone onto the computer into this like audio hosting thing? It was just like, I didn't know any of it. Right.
Yeah.
And I also didn't have a computer that was very good. In fact, it was a hand-me-down old MacBook Pro from my, at the time, brother-in-law that had to stay plugged into the wall, or else if it became uncharged, the computer would turn off. So it was just a nightmare at the time. I had two young kids.
You made it work.
I made it work, right? But it was horrible. And there was a lot of late nights, early mornings trying to figure out this podcast thing. And then and then no one knew me at the time. I wasn't involved in any forums. Facebook groups weren't what they were now, weren't what they are now. I was literally a single man mobile detailer in Orange County, California. Like I didn't know anyone. And so I was like, well, who's going to listen to my podcast? Because I don't know anyone, and no one knows me. So why would they listen? And so I started reaching out on Facebook and the internet of like, hey, I got this, thing called the podcast going. Would you be interested in letting me interview you? And some people said yes. I think Scotty Perkin was my first guest that said yes. And I remember the first day I launched, I think I had 7 downloads. When I announced that Scott was coming on the show, I think I had 21 downloads that day. And I was just like over the moon. I was like, oh my gosh, man, I got something here. This is crazy. And little by little, just tried to interview people or just try to find people that had a little bit of a following that would maybe share my interview with them. And it was actually more difficult than it sounds because a lot of people didn't know what a podcast was. Yeah. And they didn't know who I was. They didn't know what a podcast was. And they were like, I don't get it. Like, no, sorry. And so, but little by little, it started to pop, And
now, how many podcast episodes do you have under your belt?
I think I have, so I would say close to 500.
You feel that you've been able to get every guest that was on your list?
Yes. So, and that's what kind of led into the YouTube thing, was that I kind of got to the point where I had everyone that I like dreamed of having on, right? I had the Justin Labatos of the world, right? I had the Jason Roses of the world. I had Barry Maguire on the show, and it was like, I kind of got to a point of like, I don't know who else to have. I can have a lot of smaller guys, and that's great too, because I think everyone has something to give, right? Yeah. But there was no one like at the pinnacle. I remember thinking like, crap, I kind of reached like, once I had Barry Maguire on the show, I was like, I don't know who else is above him, and so, and maybe I'm just ignorant and there is someone above him. I don't know. But
no, but that's your perspective. It's your show.
Right.
That's what you view things as, and that's what makes it your show.
So it got difficult. So then I started looking at the YouTube crowd, and I was like, well, let me start going after some of these YouTubers and have them, right? Because they have big followings too.
Oh yeah.
And so, I had Pan on the show. I had Scott with Dallas Paint Correction when he was doing stuff. I had Darren with Auto Fetish on back in the day when he was really putting out stuff. And so I started developing relationships with all these YouTubers, and they were making some serious money, and the podcast was, and still doesn't really make money, but it gives a lot of access. Right. So I have access to a lot of people, which in turn, if you work it right, can lead to money, right? Opportunities. So, but with the YouTube thing, it was like, hold on, these guys are making like cash, like instantly almost, and I'm like, the more I talk to them, the more I interview these guys, I was like, there's an opportunity here, of bringing my skill set onto the YouTube scene as well. And so the problem is that by then, that was 2018, 17, 18. By then, the standard, like how to detail a vehicle was so saturated, it was ridiculous. right? And there was, I needed a differentiator, right? Going
Yeah.
back to that, needed a differentiator, and I didn't know what to do. And so I thought, I started looking outside the detailing industry into other arenas, whether it be beauty or coffee culture or even car culture, just outside of detailing, to like, what is working for other industries on YouTube that for whatever reason the detailing industry hasn't picked up on. And one of the things that was working really well was cheap versus expensive. And I was like, you know what? That gives me a great framework to work within. It's easy. I could find a cheap product. I could find an expensive product, and just compare the two and whatever. And so I think one of the first ones I did was a foam cannon, and the video just like instantly took off. And I was like,
Yeah,
okay,
I
I
remember
think,
that one.
yeah, I think I'm onto something here. So then I kind of bled that to death, the cheap versus expensive. And so now it's trying to find, cheap versus expensive still works and product reviews still work. But when something like COVID hits and production issues come in, or brands stop releasing new products as often, or we don't have a show like SEMA to go to and kind of, create ideas, it becomes more and more difficult to produce videos of good value and good content. So that's kind of something I'm dealing with right now, is like, keeping the content fresh and
Yeah.
interesting, and
And it becomes a
trying.
race because
And
others that are downtime are getting the same ideas because they're watching you and others pioneer this
right.
down these avenues. And they're like, oh, why can't I do that?
Right. And they can, and there's people that are doing way better than I do, right? And a lot of people right now are jumping onto that, like, the dirtiest detail ever uh craze that's working really well on YouTube right
Yeah.
now.
I wish
And
I still have pictures from some of those myself, but it's like,
dude, exactly. I'm like, you know how many of those cars I've
yeah,
done? I don't even
yeah.
want to do. And that's the funny.
I got PTSD when I look at those pictures.
100%.
Yeah,
Dude, exact. I was telling my wife about it. I'm like, man, these guys are killing it with these like super dirty cars. I'm like, but I literally have PTSD from doing those. Like, I can't do it. That is such crap work, and I get it. They're making a ton of money on YouTube for doing it, but I'm like, it just sucks. That work
So,
sucks.
while we're on that topic, what's the worst one that you could remember? Just give me the worst one, and I'll give you mine after you tell me.
So the worst one I was doing, there's a retirement community by where I live called Leisure World, and it's like a 55 plus whatever. And so I always get busted every time I go in there because they don't like people detailing or washing cars there, right? So every time I go there, I like get in trouble with security. But I was kind of hiding out this one time, doing more of a favor for this lady, and I'm steaming the inside of her car, and I kind of blindly like steam underneath her seat, you know, and I'm like, ooh, I like catch a whiff of something, like,
Ugh.
that doesn't smell good. So I keep steaming, like, okay, let me get this out, and then I finally look under there, and I find out later her dog had barfed, and it went underneath her seat. And as I was like steaming it, it was heating it up and like, breaking it down and bringing it back up. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like the smell was so bad. I had to stop. I was just like, this is disgusting. I'm somewhere where I don't even want to be. They don't want me here. On top of that, I'm steaming dog barf. Like, ugh, but barf is normal too. But I would almost rather take human barf over dog barf. It was horrible. But what
Yeah.
was yours?
So I had, and this was, because of having a shop, it was something that I had already looked at and was willing to take on. But my early years, I was the guy that took on jobs that nobody else would in town, especially with dirty interiors. So this one came in. It was a early to mid 2000s Lincoln town car, and had some outside work on it, which was standard. But the inside, that it was an infestation, German cockroaches, along with just disgusting
Gives me
kids
like the chills.
and nastiness. Completely gutted, and had to wear gloves, wore a mask, because when I pulled the seats and the floorboard carpet, there was so much dead roaches and roach feces.
Oh
It
my
was the
gosh.
floor pan of the vehicle interior that was just absolutely disgusting. And when I pulled that carpet, I was playing hopscotch on roaches in my bay.
Oh
Until
my
this day,
gosh.
I realized that, especially after explaining that to, going through trainings and, talking to people like
Right.
Rennie about it, that should have been a whole insurance
Totally.
claim, write
Totally.
off kind of scenario. But yeah, that was probably by far one of the most disgusting ones. I mean, we basically
Oh.
gutted everything we could other than the dash and the headliner, and
Oh.
bombed it, cleaned it, and hit it with I don't even know what disinfectant. It was like 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
That was available at the local,
Probably
Home
like
Depot,
pro
Lowe's.
product. Oh yeah, yeah. Zep
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
still
yeah, yeah.
back then.
Auto, whatever it was, odor ban or
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, that was the worst one, and
Horrible.
I tried to get as much as I could for it, and I took and documented plenty of pictures because that's one of the biggest things, right? Is you could
Yeah.
talk about it, but if you don't have pictures,
Right. Didn't happen.
nobody could visualize it unless you explain it in a way that's like storytelling, where they get
Right.
all into their imagination.
Totally.
But yeah, that was the worst
Horrible.
one. But yeah, and that's where when I was taking on things like that, I lived and learned that that's not the direction I want to go.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, you were the guy that did cars that no one else was willing to do,
Yeah,
and I think that's one important thing that people can take away. Like if you're just starting, you gotta do the crap work, man.
yeah,
Like that's
yeah.
just how it goes. Like call it trenches, call it whatever you want to call it, but like you don't start at the top,
No, no, and
you
this was
know?
like you said before. This was before coatings. I mean, this was.
Right,
I was lucky to get the outside where I could do a good wax job.
right.
That for the most part, if anything, they weren't even paying for polishing. They just wanted a good cleaner wax. They were willing to
Yep,
spend all their money on the interior. So if I could capitalize on that and squeeze the most out of it
yep,
for the dollar amount for the job, so
yep,
be it. And that's kind of what my reputation was built on in the beginning, was interiors.
yep.
And then of course coatings came around and things started to make a great transition.
which has been awesome, right? Coatings
Yes.
have been great, and I think yeah.
And you're
But
still juggling overall between both still operating and detailing
yep,
along with these other ventures that you've been successful at.
yep. So one thing that another, I think you nailed it in the beginning when you talked about kind of these gray areas or these transition times. And that was yet another transition time for me, was kind of walking away from mobile detailing. And as what was happening as I just got busier with podcasts or YouTube or a little bit of product consulting that I do, I needed and then I had 3 kids, and I lived across the street from a school. And so I was trying to record like these YouTube videos in between like detailing and recess and lunch and like, me trying to go work and detail cars. And I'm like, crap, this is too difficult. Like this is getting ridiculous. I need a shop or I need a studio. But it was really at a time where I didn't know if I could afford to make that jump to have like this. It sounded so bougie to me at the time. Like, oh, you're just going to have like this man cave that you go hang out at, and, and stuff's
Detail
not,
cars and
and
make them look
detail
fancy.
cars. Like, come on, dude, who are you? And so I ended up making the jump though, and getting a small shop, an office warehouse shop. It was like 1,100 square feet. And so that helped to, one, get me out of my house, because things started getting weird too, where people would comment like, "Oh, dude, I know where you live," and it was like,
No, no.
like,
It's like I'm eating
like,
dinner. Like, what do you
yeah.
need?
And no one showed up, but just that thought of like, this is where my kids are.
Yeah.
Like, this is nothing ever happened. I just didn't want it to get to the point where
Yeah.
something potentially happened. You never know. So I needed to get out of the house. And that was on top of like people saying, "What do you live like, where do you live, man?" I could just hear kids screaming all the time,
Like a playground in the background all the
like
time.
a playground. And it literally was like right across the street.
Don't worry,
And
I
so,
got rid of my white van when I closed down my mobile detail.
exactly. So I got that small office warehouse, and then I started doing like, doing more of a fixed location detailing operation, and have since moved to a bigger shop, to kind of help give me like almost a home base to where I do all these operations at. And so mobile detailing has completely gone to the wayside. And I still take on cars here. On Friday, I'm doing a coating on a Tesla Model Y here. And I've really started to limit how much detailing I do, because it just, I have other things that are more profitable that I do still in the detailing industry. And so I charge more to do cars, and I'm a little bit more exclusive, if you want to use that term. But I will say having a shop is completely next level. And just talk about, I think I would have made the jump and the transition way sooner, because the impression and the atmosphere that you can create at a shop, that a customer can see, is just totally different than mobile detailing. And
Absolutely.
you can command more money. It's much nicer to have a toilet that you can utilize at any time. You can have, the controlled environment of having a small shop is just something that you can't have mobilely, and it's, I just think you can command more money. No one negotiates price ever with me at a shop, which has been very weird, because I'm totally used to that all the time with mobile. Everyone negotiates and everyone wants a better price.
Yep.
At a shop, it never happens to me, which is really weird. So yeah, I would have moved to a shop long ago.
Yeah, and there's a lot of limitations with mobile. You have everything at your fingertips in a shop. You may not have on your your work van or truck. Uh, weather, that's always the biggest factor.
Totally.
You always have work when you have a shop, whether it's raining, snowing, whatever it may be. I mean, there's
Totally.
definitely a lot of pros and cons, and there's different levels to the detail industry, right? And every level has its
Right.
way of playing out. It's the choice that you make to play at what field you want to play on.
And sometimes you have to work through the levels, right?
Yes.
Sometimes
Yeah.
you can't afford to just start at a shop,
No, because that's a lot of overhead, and if you
a
don't have
lot
the
of overhead.
capital,
You can
yeah,
crash and burn fast,
oh
you
yeah,
know?
and that will
So
hurt your name, local
it
market.
does. It
Yeah.
does, but it's yeah. Having a shot, it's just so nice.
Well, now with that too, now you've limited yourself to being more exclusive, which is right because
Yeah.
that's where the industry has evolved to. I feel like there's a lot of, and I give kudos to and credit to a lot of those in the detail industry that have taken and making the jump to a shop like you did, but also have dressed up their shop. In the
Right.
beginning, it was more like, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Now it's a standard, and it's become really
Yes.
cool to see some of these people dump some money into shops to where
Yes.
now some of these ways that they're doing it are fairly inexpensive compared to when it first
Right.
started with people
Sure.
dressing up their shops. So now it's
Yep.
more affordable to do it to make it look good. And it's the right thing to do in regards to presentation. But
100%.
it allows you to actually make a living, make an income, have where you could have a lifestyle and a
Yes.
business. And it changes the game, like you said, completely.
100%. And I think that over the past few years, we've seen that, and we continue to see that transition in the detailing industry from really this kind of like mom and pop, very DIYer esque industry to like, whether it's the I call them the Facebook brands, these marketing companies that have started a detailing product company. But we're really seeing, or maybe it's a mixture of coatings and more money being pumped into the industry as well. But we're seeing this like elevation of the detailing industry in a very, very positive direction. And so whether it is guys dressing up their shop and making them look very nice and not so homegrown,
Yeah.
or product brands that look very professional and not, a printed out piece of paper with tape on it and that's their label,
Yeah.
So
And their
we've
menu.
seen, and their menu, right? So we've seen a very, I think a very positive change and a very good trajectory for the detailing industry of becoming, something that can offer a lifestyle, can offer a real business, and real money, which is exciting to see and really exciting to be a part of.
Yeah. And this is where it takes, I feel, the detailer trying to run a business to transition them into a business owner being a detailer.
You have to, and that would be my encouragement to any detailer listening is like, I think the biggest thing plaguing the detailing industry is that detailers don't run their business like a business, and they don't focus on it as a business. They focus on, their craft, which is great, and paint correction or whatever you want it to be, which is phenomenal, and you obviously need to know how to do that. But I would argue, more importantly, you need to know how to run a business.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know Paint polishing is great, but you could teach it to someone else too, and you could pay someone else by the hour to do that. and you
And
can
they'll
create it
love every bit of their job.
and they'll love every bit of their job. Cause really at the end of the day, once you have, this may be controversial to say it and you may not agree and that's fine, but paint polishing really, it's a skill, but it's a teachable skill that is also repeatable. So in my book, doing a paint correction or machine on paint is very a low paying job. You could disagree. I'm totally fine with that. And people can disagree, but it's teachable in a confined setting. And this is where having a shop helps, but you can create a system within your shop that, hey, we use this pad, this machine, this polish. It's not going to work 100% of the time. Don't get me wrong. And there's going to be times where you have to step in and you as the professional with multiple years experience can help your employee. However, I think you can create a repeatable process to paint correction that would take you out of it, and you could graduate to a higher level of operating the business and getting higher paying clients, focus on sales, things like that, versus sitting there behind a buffer all day.
Oh, I 100% agree. And I got 3 guys for that reason. And I stood over them like a shadow.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes. Not just handing them the polisher and saying, here you go. Let's see you screw something up.
It's incredibly difficult to relinquish that, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing. And being there in the mix, I think that's where a lot of people have the issue is they don't want to stand there and have to train somebody. They don't have patience.
Right.
Well, if you want to grow, that's what comes with it is patience. Paint correction is patience.
Paint correction is patience. And I'm the first guy in line to say, look, it's easier if I just do it, right? It's easier if I do it and not train someone, but that is not sustainable long-term, not if you want to grow, and not everyone wants to grow. And that's okay too, so it all depends what you want, but I don't want to be sitting behind a polisher all day. I don't.
100% agree. It wears on your body. And over time, I mean, inhaling everything that comes with that, it's a good thing to get under your belt to be good at your craft and be top at your craft, but you could pass that along to somebody who has, if you paint the same picture and give them the same vision and they're motivated, you could pass that along. It's a craft. They become a journeyman or, an apprentice to say, and that's how you bring them in. Just like any other trade, being a plumber, being a roofer, they come in as journeyman or apprentice to learn the trade. And if they're a fit, great. If they're not, you move on to the next one. It's a numbers game sometimes.
100%.
And that's just how it is with the world, right? Until you 100%. Find the right guy. But
that's how it goes.
Yeah. So what's the future looking like for Jimbo? What do you got going on now? And what are you looking forward to that you could speak on?
Oh man, I just think that the detailing, I feel like we're, and it has been brewing, but I've always felt like the detailing industry lags behind some other industries. And I guess I speak to the beauty industry a lot, not because I'm interested in it, but because my wife is, she's a makeup artist. And so she's very much, up to date with what's going on in the beauty industry. And there's a lot of comparables from the beauty industry to the detailing industry, and they're beautifying people's faces and making people, I call it face painting, but essentially the same idea that we're doing with cars, just with people's faces.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, and the beauty industry is just a massive industry with tons of money and tons of products and a ton of hype and BS, right? So a lot of comparables to the car washing or detailing industry. But what I'm starting to see is that the detailing industry is really becoming a lot more mainstream, which is very, very exciting. So I'm excited to kind of play in that space of kind of innovation and watching this industry grow and really becoming, like you mentioned, with guys fixing up their shops or whatever, or product brands or whatever. But I'm very, very excited for the detailing industry, and I'm excited to be a part of it, whether it's creating content or doing cars or playing with these products or whatever it may be. I'm just excited to be a part of the industry, and so thankful that I am to be able to see all this stuff, and just be right in the mix of it. I love it. It's so fun to see it go from homegrown to not corporate, but like see some money be tossed in there, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. No, and you
So
play a good part of that in a piece of the puzzle that makes it all one big picture.
yeah, and it's
So
fun.
it is. And would you have anything that you would want to tell any of the people watching this as a last statement of any type?
Don't overthink it, man. Like keep it fun. You know, at the end of the day, when there's a big difference, and you know this just as well as I do. There's a big difference between detailers on the internet and detailers in person. And the detailing industry in real life is a group of awesome people, girls and guys. There's not a lot of drama. There's not a lot of strife. These people are awesome, and just don't take it so serious. I think on the internet sometimes we could take things and ourselves too serious. And at the end of the day, I think if you're in the detailing industry, you have one of the greatest jobs or opportunities in the world. We play with cars, we get to play with products, we get to do podcasts on Wednesday mornings, like or in the middle of the day. Like, are you kidding me? Like, we get to wear shorts and t-shirts and sunglasses and be cool. Like,
I'm just wearing a shirt. So I mean.
yeah, I'm cold. So it's like 62 degrees outside. So I'm a little cold. But yeah, it's a great industry, man. And if you want to be a part of it, be a part of it. And it really is awesome. So, but I think when people start taking themselves too serious, or they lose perspective on what we're actually doing, one, I think it hurts the industry a little bit, because the majority of us are just cool people that like hanging out with each other, regardless of our product affiliations or whatever, badges we may have or whatever. So yeah, don't take yourself too serious. Have fun.
Awesome. Definitely 100% agree. So how would people find you, Jimbo?
All you have to do is go to autodetailingpodcast.com, that URL that I searched up way back in 2014, and thought, man, how can I make it easy for people to find me? And so, yeah, just autodetailingpodcast.com. I have the links to all my other socials on there, and you could search Auto Detailing Podcast on any, Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or YouTube or whatever you want, and I'll pop right up.
Anything outside of that with your business, how would they find you?
They can go just DM me, or you can email me, Jimbo at autodetailingpodcast.com, or info at
like your website.
Yeah, jimbosdetailing.com.
Gotcha. Okay.
I kind of try to have everything linked together to kind of make it as easy as possible to find me.
Okay.
So yeah,
that works.
Pretty easy.
Yeah,
I'm still working on my Google search, where you could just search Jimbo and I pop up. I've been working on that for a few years, but I have some other big leaguers like Jimbo Fisher and some actual celebrities that kind of take the ranking. So, but I'm still working on it.
Got to get creative with that, right? That way, when
I
you do the Google
creative.
image search, your face pops up all the time.
Yeah, I think I'm still on page like 1084, but whatever. I'm working on it.
Oh, well, Jimbo, thank you. I appreciate you being on. This is our number 6 podcast.
Awesome,
so
man.
We're, breaking the waters in regards to how all this works, and getting, some good guests under our belt. And you're one of them, of course. So
awesome, man. I appreciate
the opportunity. It. Yeah.
No, I appreciate you having me. It's always fun. I always look forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jimbo, and everybody else who's out there who has watched. Thank you for watching another episode of Reflection Artist Live. And if you have any questions, you could reach out to any of our platforms, which would be any of the podcast platforms, mainly through Buff and Shine or the Reflection Artist page on social media. So thanks again for watching, and everybody have a good rest of your Wednesday. Thanks, Jimbo.
See ya.